Welcome to Impact OC, the only program showcasing the people and organizations shaping Orange County. With your host, Don Camber.
Hello, live from the OC Talk Radio studios at UCI's Beal Applied Innovation Center. I'm OC Talk Radio Public Affairs Director Don Camber with another great guest positively impacting our community. Today, I welcome Cyber Safety Cop and Total Safety Solutions LLC founder Clayton Cranford. After serving over 20 years in law enforcement in roles such as school resource officer, juvenile investigator, and behavioral threat assessor, he's become one of the nation's foremost experts in social media, child safety, and threat assessments. Thank you, Clayton, for being on Impact OC.
Thank you, Don, for having me.
Clayton, please explain how the digital world poses a major threat to children and how that inspired you to create Cyber Safety Cop.
Well, when I was a school resource officer in Rancho Santa Margarita about 2012, I noticed a real shift with kids. We went from about 20% of teens having smartphones to about 80% in 2015, and now it's probably almost 100%. And we saw during that time a shift in their mental health. So since 2010, the anxiety and depression of children, teens, boys and girls have gone up 140 to 170%. Girls are getting hit the worst, and that's correlating with a rise in suicidal thoughts and actually children committing suicide. We just last week up in LA County and at the same school, it was a high school, I think Rancho Cucamonga, 2 children committed suicide within 2 weeks of each other at the same school. So what we're seeing is a radical change in our children's mental health, and it's correlating very closely to the adoption of mobile devices, cell phones, and social media. So that is a huge problem. And then we also have children being exposed to human beings online that they never would have otherwise. And we're having a lot of children who are being sexually exploited online. And I dealt with all those things as a juvenile detective, as a school resource officer, and now in my capacity of going to schools all over the United States. But we're Orange County based, so we go to Saddleback Unified, Capo Unified, and up into LA and the Inland Empire, speaking to students K through 12 about making smart, healthy choices online, but also talking to their parents in a parent after school education program, where I'm really really trying to get after the parents and telling them we need to start thinking differently about these devices. They're not a toy. They're not a mere convenience. They're actually changing your kid. So we really need to be very different about how we're introducing these devices and when we should be introducing these devices to our children.
Can you be more specific on how these devices cause these issues in the children? Yeah,
so a couple of things. So one, you have distraction. So children, in fact, we as parents are kind of the instigator of this whole thing. When your child's very young and they cry, what do you see parents do? Immediately sliding a screen in front of their kid to pacify them. And so year after year, this is how a child's learning to deal with their feelings. And then we have teens who are because of these devices and because of social media are more anxious. The way that they fix their feelings or negative emotions like anxiety or depression, it's by going on these devices or gaming online to kind of shut down that part of their brain. And so it's just kind of feeding. It's like this really kind of vicious circle that's happening here. And the other thing, especially why this is hitting girls the hardest, is because of the the comparison that's happening online. So they look at people online, other girls online, and they're comparing their lives with these individuals, especially the imagery. And because what they're looking at is a often doctored, curated, filtered image, they just look at it and they feel like, I don't really add up. Like what I'm seeing up here is this person who's beautiful, and I look at myself in the mirror and I'm really dissatisfied with who I am. And so they're depressed by that. So I mean, that's kind of it in a nutshell. But we have the number of girls who hurt themselves, right? Non-suicidal self-injury is something that's a really is an indicator of deep anxiety. Since 2010, it's gone up 300% in teen girls. So you really, actually we're seeing this everywhere in the world. So it's not just an American problem. It's happening in every other country where they've introduced phones. And so it's hard to kind of explain away why this is happening, and it's happening with phones. There's not a lot of research. There's a lot of evidence to show that they're correlated for sure. There's still not a lot of research to show causation, right? But I think even when we take phones away from like college students in controlled studies for weeks at a time, they report better mental health. So we do have some evidence, right? Kind of causation evidence, but we as parents, and now we're actually seeing schools doing this, right? We have a lot of school districts taking away phones during the school day, but parents are fighting that. I want parents to know that your concept of what is important here is upside down. Parents think giving their child a phone is going to make them more safe, but the evidence and my personal experience is the exact opposite. And that's maybe the biggest fight I'm trying to fight right now, is really to kind of change the way parents are thinking about this.
What are some of the threats facing children?
Well, I mean, immediately you're looking at depression, anxiety, and then you have sextortion. So this is one of the big ones that I deal with probably a couple of times a month. I have a parent calling me and saying my child, usually their teenage boy, sent a nude image of themselves to a complete stranger. So typically the way this works is we have a young man who meets a cute girl online, and this person, maybe solicited or unsolicited, sends the victim a nude image and then says, if you want more images of me, send me an image of you. And we have tens of thousands of young men, mostly. We do have female victims as well, but sending nude images of themselves, and immediately they get a message saying, if you don't give me $500, I'm gonna send this image to everyone you know. And what's really scary about this is, and what parents understand, is that this person threatens your child in a way that kind of just gets to their core. They really understand kind of the way your child ticks, and they threaten them with shame and guilt to the point where that child thinks, I can't tell my mom and dad because they're not going to love me anymore. My friends, if they see this image, they're not going to be my friends anymore. And literally the extorter will say, if you don't do this, you might as well just kill yourself. And last year we had more than 30 kids do that. So one of the things that we go to middle school and high schools, we talk specifically about that to students and say, this is a trap. Don't fall into it. But if you do, it's okay. There are people who want to help you, and really kind of fighting the message that the extorter has, which is nobody will help you. And that's just not true. So letting kids know that there is a way out, but also like this is what the trap looks like. The problem is that we're dealing with kids who don't have well-developed prefrontal cortexes, right? They're not good at making choices. They're doing based on what feels good in the moment. And when you're online, you hit that send button. Yeah, you don't get that choice back. So it's an uphill battle with teens. I've been doing it for more than 10 years, talking to children. The problems haven't changed. In fact, they've gotten a little bit worse in terms of children victimized online. So I really want to get after parents and say, look, you do not have to give your child a phone. In fact, we strongly recommend you do not give your child a smartphone until they're in high school. If your child's in middle school and they absolutely need a phone, like there's a legitimate reason for them to have a phone, get them a flip phone, something that doesn't connect to the internet, have apps. And this is the one that's going to be tough. Do not give your child social media like Instagram, Snapchat, or TikTok until they're 16. And I actually would go farther to say I wouldn't give my child Snapchat until they're in college or graduated high school.
How do you intervene?
Well, as a parent, well, you need to have a conversation with your kid. And again, a lot of parents, my generation of parents, did not grow up with the internet, social media, so they're like, well, what do I even talk about? So on my website at cybersafetycop.com, we have conversation starters. We have how do you talk to your kid about all these different issues? And there's many, right? Talk to your kid about pornography, talking to your kid about predators, talking to your kid about bullying and all those other things. But also my book, Parenting in the Digital World, also walks you through those things. So it's really kind of hand-holding, leading you in this journey with your child where you're their mentor and you're supposed to help your kid kind of navigate these things. But at the same time, we as parents need to have boundaries for our kids. And up to this point, there's been none. There's been very little boundary. So I would say, number one, follow the recommendations that I had. Don't give your child a phone till high school, a smartphone, social media till 16. And if you give them social media or you give them a smartphone, you need to monitor that. And there's apps out there that'll help you do that. The one that we like at Cyber Safety Cop is an app called OurPact, OurPact. You install this on your kid's device. It runs in the background, helps limit screen time. It'll alert you if there's some dangerous things happening on their device, gives you an opportunity as a parent to step in and intervene. All my sad stories, Don, are a story about a good kid who makes a bad choice and a parent who did not know what was going on until it was too late. So you can't change a kid into making a better decision maker. It's really hard. You can kind of nudge their little brain towards doing that by talking to them, but ultimately as parents, we have the legal and moral right to know what's going on with that device. And so part of that is just checking in with your kid, physically looking at their phone. It's your phone, you own it, it's not their phone. And then maybe putting an app like OurPact on their phone will help you as well.
So what are some of the programs you offer at schools?
Okay. So we go to schools K through 12 and talk to them about, we call it cyber safety, assembly for students. We have a parent talk on that same subject. We also go to schools and talk about vaping, marijuana, and fentanyl. So one of the things I did for the Sheriff's Department was ran our drug education program. It's interesting. Those things intersect. Kids are meeting drug dealers on Snapchat and Instagram. Probably the number one way that they're getting their hands on drugs, like things that contain fentanyl, and we know that it's incredibly dangerous. So we do that 6th through 12th for the kids, also with the students, the parents as well, and then we also have training for school administration and school staff. So we go out to schools, educate the professionals there, whoever works on the campus, about those topics: cyber safety, how's social media impacting kids, vaping, marijuana, fentanyl, and also preventing school violence through behavioral threat assessment. So we're training school staff to identify individuals, children on a path of violence, and then intervene before violence gets visited at their school.
Are children receptive to the information you're providing?
Yeah, actually, it's been really neat because after our presentation, we have scores of kids coming up to me or one of my instructors and saying, "Yeah, that happened to me, and thank you so much for being here." And the way we talk to kids, we don't talk down to them. If you tell a kid don't do this, it's not a good way of getting them not to do it, right? So what we do is we tell stories, and our stories come from our experiences as juvenile detectives, and they find the stories fascinating. So they're just, riveted. We're telling a story, but also they can relate with that story because it's about a kid like them, and they can think about, like, okay, so when we go to schools year after year after year. We do hundreds of schools a year. And it's funny, a lot of times the students who saw me the year prior don't remember me. They look at me, they're like, "Oh, who are you?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a cyber safety guy." They're like, "Okay." And I'm like, but then I start telling the story, and I start telling that story. They're like, "Oh, I remember this story." So the stories are the things that are important, right? And it's the credibility that we have with the students. And again, we talk to them like, we tell them up front, you guys know everything. We're not going to tell you something about the internet you don't know. Our job here is to change the way you think about it, because it's your beliefs that are really important. What do you believe about the internet? What do you believe about who are you in the internet? And so we want to tell you some stories that maybe change that. And we have school administrators coming away saying, like, our kids were coming up and talking to us about things happening that we didn't even know about. Like, kids come up and say, "Mrs. So-and-so, you really didn't know I saw this student last night on Instagram saying these things. Like, I just wanted to let you know about it." And she goes, "That wouldn't have happened if you were here." So it's getting kids help that need it, but also it's hard to prove a negative, but hopefully helping students make better choices so they're not making a bad choice and getting hurt.
Tell us some of those stories, though.
Oh, well, yeah. So actually, when I was on the threat assessment team, and I went to all the schools in Orange County. So it was called the SMART team. We went to hundreds of schools. And so I think it was Laguna Hills High School, perhaps. Anyway, the point is that we had a young man who posted an image of him holding an airsoft gun in a classroom. And he posted this on his public Instagram account, which, of course, like thousands of people saw an image of a student holding a gun in a classroom. So appropriately, people were concerned. So we go to the kid's house, we do an interview, and we learn quickly that's an airsoft gun. It's not a real gun. And I asked him, in so many words, like, "Why did you do this?" And he said, "I did it because I thought it was funny," which, by the way, was the answer that I got for like 90+% of all the threats that I dealt with. And thankfully, most threats that we dealt with were not threats that the person ever intended to carry out. They were usually manipulative, or maybe they're trying to tell a bad joke, whatever. But the point is that he did something that he could not take back. That principal of the school district said that student cannot come back here. So he ended up getting expelled, and the principal said this kid is like one of our favorite students. He's one of the best players on our championship CIF soccer team, and he's already got colleges, D1 schools looking at him, right? Of course, now he's getting expelled for bringing a quote-unquote dangerous weapon to school and making a felony threat. And so when I got called to the expulsion hearing, I walked in there and he looked up at me and he saw somebody he thought maybe could help him. Because I talked to him like for more than an hour that night with he and his dad. And he looked up at me with tears in his eyes. He said, "I'm so sorry." He said over and over again. And I looked at him and I'm like, this could be my kid. This kid right here, like the same age as my boys at that time. I'm like, this could be my kid. Here's a good kid who made a bad choice. This parent wants the best for his kid and had no idea what was going on. And now this kid made a choice he can't take back. And I tell this story to students and you can hear a pin drop in the room. And I say, that's not fair. It's not fair that you can do something at age 16 that can change your life like this. When I was your age, I made bad choices, but there was no internet then. If anybody were to talk about things that I did at 16, it's a rumor now, right? It's hard to prove. You are making a choice that you can't take back, and you have to think differently about this. And it's that story. In stories like that, the students are like, okay, this makes sense to me, right? If I just say, hey, just don't say mean, hurtful things online. Don't make threats online. Kids will be like, got it. And they'll walk out the door and forget about it. But it's that story that really sticks with them.
So what can children do to be digitally safe?
Well, I think like the stories that we share with them, and then we kind of give them some basic rules about basically what we're trying to do in our presentations to students is make them understand that the digital world and the real world are the same world. The reason why kids are making these choices online, because they don't believe that. Although cognitively they understand that they're the same, but in the moment when they do things online, it just feels consequence free. They do things online they would never do face to face in a million years. So, and we kind of juxtapose that in the presentation, and the kids are like, you're right, that doesn't make sense. Like, we would never do this face to face, but we're doing it online. Why is that? And the answer is the real world and the digital world, they feel like the same world. They do things because of the way they feel. So what we're trying to do is break down that kind of disconnect that they have. But ultimately, again, it's an uphill battle, right? You're asking a kid to think about something kind of in a really abstract way that I don't think their brains are ready for. Like, I have to have conversations with middle schoolers or elementary students about not sharing their personal information with a complete stranger online. Like, that's never something that a sixth grader should worry about. Like, all you should be worrying about in the sixth grade is, am I hanging out with my friends this weekend? Are we going to go to the beach? Like, that's all you should be worrying about in Southern California if you're a kid. But these kids have to worry about a dangerous adult world that got shoved into their lives because their parents gave them a phone, thinking that this was going to make things safer for them. So I guess to answer your question is, we can make our kids more resilient, right? I think maybe that's the goal is, hey, if this happens to you, this is what you should do. If you get bullied, this is how you should handle it, right? Like, there's some steps that we try to give them, be more resilient. But I don't really think we can just kind of give our kids all the info and they're going to make good choices. I don't think it's an education problem. I think it's more basic than that. I really lean on the parents. I'm like, if you're going to it's like giving your kid keys to a car. Would you ever give your 16-year-old keys to the car with no driver's training whatsoever? Would you ever do that? And the parents are like, no, it's crazy, right? This is what we're doing with phones. We're giving kids phones. It's like you're giving keys to the Ferrari when they're like 15 and saying, good luck with that, right? You would never do that in any other situation. They need to be prepared. And then you need to put some guardrails up for them so they don't fly off the side of the road because they're going to be driving too fast. Like, that's what kids do. So yeah, we can't make kids different so much as opposed to changing parents. Parents are in control and give them the information they need to make a better choice. Because if you're a parent, you don't understand. If you're buying your kid a phone, you're thinking this is something fun and convenient. I can call my kid. You're not thinking about the mental health impact that this is having. And like, why would you? And slowly now it's becoming kind of part of our consciousness. We have, the Surgeon General who's talking about it. Schools are making these choices, which are great. But parents, I think, are kind of slow. on the uptake here. And again, like I said, it starts very young. So we need to change everything, how we're doing things as parents.
So what are some of the guardrails parents could put into the phones?
Yeah, so parental controls are huge. And then using an app like Our Pact is also huge. The parental controls, if any parent of theirs ever tried doing this, you've probably thrown your hands up in the air after 10 minutes saying, I can't do this. Like, this is ridiculous. My book, Parenting the Digital World, walks you through the steps. And I remember I just updated it to the latest operating system for the app for the iPhone. And I got to like step 27 or something, like all these different steps you have to go through. I'm like, there's 27 different things you have to do as a parent to get your kid's iPhone safe. That is not okay. Like, it shouldn't be that difficult for us. So Our Pack does make this turnkey in a lot of ways. It kind of takes over like a lot of the parental controls and makes it very simple, and kind of, you just set it up the way you want it. You do the screen time limits, very important. But it also takes screenshots of what your kid's doing online, grabs that, shares it with you if it's something that's inappropriate. So it does a lot that for you. But again, I think parents, like, if you're saying yes to a device, if you're saying yes to social media, you are on the hook. And now I think we live in a world where parents are being held responsible in ways that they never had to be for their child's behavior. We have kids who are committing violence at schools, and their parents are going to prison or being sued for millions of dollars. And the argument of, I just didn't know, doesn't really float anymore. If you gave your kid a phone and they're using it to victimize another kid, and God forbid that kid hurts themselves or takes their own life, I guarantee that family's going to sue you. And you saying, well, I just didn't know what was going on with my kid's phone, my 14-year-old's phone, or 13-year-old's phone, or 12 or 10-year-old's phone, is not going to be sufficient. So parents, you have, as I'll say it again, the moral and the legal right to know what's going on with your kid's phone. And frankly, there's so much threats to your kids out there that as parents, I don't think we can choose not to do this.
So what are the signs of digital issues?
Well, yeah, I mean, some of it are going to fly under the radar. I think there could be a lot going on with your kid online, and you'll have no idea. So again, that's why you need something like Our Pack to flag these problems. But I also would say, if your kid's baseline behavior, like every parent kind of knows what their kid's baseline behavior is. If you see deviations from that, you see a kid who's withdrawing, who's not playing with friends, who's choosing to stay inside and text, like if you start seeing things like that, those are red flags for you to be kind of wondering what's going on. I had a very good friend, his daughter had pretty much those red flags, and he didn't know that she was being sexually exploited online, and by actually a student at the school, one of her classmates, a boy at the school, group of boys actually. And he just thought, oh, well, she's going into middle school, she just wants, maybe it's just like a phase or whatever. I want to just give her some privacy. And he's like, I made a horrible choice. He goes, I should have been asking questions, I should have been digging into her phone, because she was tormented for the entire summer, and driven to the point where she was cutting herself. She ran away, and like, he goes, we went through so much as a family. And he goes, plus as a parent, as a father especially, he goes, my job is to protect my kid. And this is one of the guys who was like in my wedding party, just a beautiful man, loves his children. But for my brother to be weeping on the phone to me and telling me this, like, it was so heartbreaking. And I have so many experiences like that with other parents, that when I get up in front of a group of parents, I'm like, I'm here because I care about you and your family. And that's why I put on a badge. That's why I put on a bullet resistant vest and a gun and went to schools every day, because that to me is what was the most important thing, right? With kids, we have a chance, right? When I was a patrol officer, I'd deal with adults. I always felt like I'm putting out a fire that's just going to spark up the minute I leave. Like, I can't fix these problems. So with kids, I feel like we have a chance. And so your child's experiences online are changing them, and in ways that cannot be unchanged, or getting broken in ways that cannot be easily fixed. So we cannot be on the sideline as parents and just wondering if it's going to be okay. It may be okay. I don't think any kid's unaffected I think all children are affected somehow. But I just know kids who have been obliterated, and it didn't have to happen. And so to be able to do that as a parent is not beyond our ability, right? If you're a parent who's never been very techie, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. Like, we will baby step you through this.
Are the bullies ever brought to justice?
Well, I mean, the bullying thing. So, like in my book, even Parenting the Digital World, I have like one little paragraph about bullying, and because there's just so much caustic, horrible behavior online, it's hard to define what bullying is anymore. We knew what bullying was when we were kids. A guy someone backing up against a wall, poking you in the chest, or smacking you around, or getting violent, and that was something that happened to elicit a very prescribed response, which was power domination. They wanted you to cower away, and they wanted to have the feeling of power, and they got status from other students at school. That doesn't exist online. So it's kind of equal opportunity, people being horrible. So really, there's just so much, the behavior online is so bad, it's become normative. So I don't really think about bullying, and a lot of bullying is like exclusionary bullying, like especially with girls. Girls will exclude other girls from their circle or things they're doing online, and that in some ways is worse than any physical bullying because it never goes away. It's 24/7. Boys, when they have issues, it tends to go to like maybe physical, and then it's over, right? Like there's a resolution. Boys are not going to let this thing drag on. Girls drag this thing on for years sometimes, and it's just a grinding down. And I saw it happen very often in middle school. Middle school was really rough. When kids finally get to high school, they can at least find their people, right? Who are they going to kind of click with? Whether you're a jock, you kind of click with those guys. If you're a musician, you click with those people. Like, you can kind of find your group. But in middle school, you're like in a herd, and you're all just trying to like figure it out together, and it's really rough. Yeah, the bullying thing. I don't. When we go to our presentations, we don't even talk about it specifically. What we talk about is if someone sends you a mean, rude, or threatening message, this is how you handle it. Because I can't make a kid be nice online. I can't do it. There's nothing I can say to change that. Kids are rough on each other. Being online is like kerosene on a fire because there's no immediate consequence to you being mean and hurtful. There's a screen there, not a human being. So they do say things that are like off the chart, especially in their gaming. They say things that are just would make your skin crawl. But I want kids to be resilient, to know like, hey, if someone's doing that to you, you may feel powerless because someone's doing something to you online, but here's how you get the power back. You don't respond. You don't hit back. You don't share it to a friend. You just go silent, right? You just become something that they can't reflect off of, right? And then you take a screenshot of that. You share that with an adult, not another student. We have kids sharing this stuff with friends, and it just explodes. And then you block and report them online. And if you do that, you get your power back. Like this, I want to make kids resilient because, again, if they're gonna play in the digital world, it's horrible. Like, and actually, that is not even the worst part of it. But they need to know what to do, and so that's kind of what we're trying to do.
So you have any success stories of people learning from you?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And the problem is, like, also a lot of times when someone reaches out to us, it's when they have a problem, right? We don't often get people reaching out to us and say, hey, this really worked well for me. But occasionally we get a student come back and say, what you said made such a huge difference for me. What can I do? Like, can I do something at my high school to like promote this with our students? Can we make a club? So we do get these stories. Especially, we had a student who got messaged. It was a young man got messaged to send him a nude image to this person that he met online. And he's like, oh, this is what Sergeant Cranford, they call me Sergeant Cranford, although I'm retired. That's what Sergeant Cranford talked about. He went right to his parent, showed his parent took to the police department, and it turned out that person was not a cute little girl, little blonde from Newport Beach or whatever it was. It was a 45-year-old man who had victimized about 500 other boys, and and he wasn't asking for money, right? He wasn't extorting them. He was actually taking their imagery that they're sending him and then sharing it with people like him online. So he's basically trafficking these boys without them really realizing that he was doing it. And yeah, he got caught because that student recognized this was a problem, took it to a parent, felt safe enough to tell his parent, and his parent did something about it. What about all those hundreds of kids before that who didn't tell anybody? So it takes somebody to be brave, to know what to do and do something about it. And if it's going to be the kids, it's not going to be us, right? We're not hanging out with our kids online. We're not in those spaces with them. So hopefully you have a kid who can do that. In that case, we did.
So you're changing the world.
Well, man, I wish I could. I don't know. I'm trying to make a difference with the people in front of me as much as I possibly can. But man, if I could wave a magic wand and I could get parents to hold back on giving their children these devices until later when they're in high school, holding back on social media, I think if all parents did that, we could reverse the declining mental health that we're seeing in our kids. It wouldn't happen. I think we would see some improvements soon. Their test scores would get much better. Like, we have schools who do that. They're just like, hey, we're just not gonna. Actually, some of the private schools on their teams, like their sports teams are like, we're gonna get off social media for 2 weeks and see if how we do on the field gets better and how we're doing in the classroom gets better. And they're seeing huge improvements in all those things: attention, just attitudes, behaviors, everything gets positive in the positive direction. So if I could get parents to do that, and maybe that's one of the big things, is that when your kid goes to school and they come home and they say, everybody in my middle school, everybody in my 8th grade class has a smartphone and on Instagram, I need that too. That's hard for a parent. I would like all parents to get together and say, we're not doing that. Maybe as a community at that school. As a community at this school, we're making a choice as parents. We're going to say no to smartphones until our kids are in high school. We're going to say no to social media until they're 16, so that our kids don't face the social pressure that they have, which is real. But at the end of the day, as a parent, you have to make a choice for your kid. That you have to make the best choice for your kid. And if your kid's sad, and they will be if you say no to a smartphone until high school, or social media until they're 16, I guarantee you they're not going to be as sad as they're going to be if you give it to them when they want it.
Please give us your website again.
It's cybersafetycop.com.
Thank you, Cyber Safety Cop and Total Safety Solutions LLC founder Clayton Cranford, for being on Impact OC. And I thank everyone for tuning in. I'm OC Talk Radio Public Affairs Director Dawn Camber. Have an impactful day.
You've been listening to Impact OC, the only program showcasing the people and organizations shaping our community. Right here on Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio.